Welcome back. Now this is the third typical exam question. Explain the title of the poem by discussing 3 different guilds. I want us to look at this. Explain the title of the poem. That question can be hardened. The examiner can say something further or can use a different word. The examiner can use the word significance. Significance. Or can use the word effect. What is the significance of the poem? What is the significance of the title? What is the effect of the title? In fact, there is another word, relevance. What is the relevance of the title? The examiner uses these 3 words, of course not together, but differently at different occasions. The examiner uses them to bring that desired effect. Significance, what is there? Explain the significance. Explain the effect. Explain the relevance of the title of this poem. Remember, title is very important. Okay, maybe the other word, the importance. 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 If the examiner wants to simplify, he can talk about the irony. What is the irony of the poem? Like the poem, the common poem that I like, Building the Nation. Today I did my share in Building the Nation. I drove the permanent secretary to an important urgent function. If you go further, the menu reflected its importance. This is a chauffeur, a driver, driving somebody who is a permanent secretary. Permanent secretaries are important people in government. They are supposed to go to this and that hotel and attend to highly delicate diplomatic duties, government affairs. That is how they build the nation. They lay down policies, strategies on how governments work. But you see, the writer of this poem is not telling us about that. He's telling us about how the menu reflected its importance. Cold bell beer with small talk, fried chicken, niceties, ice cream to cover the stereotype jokes, and coffee to keep the peers awake on the return journey. You see, that is building the nation. But indeed, ironically, it is not building the nation. The only person building the nation here is the driver because he has done his work. So that title is ironic. It is ironic. It is also sarcastic. I said ironic, sarcastic. You can also talk about satirical. Satirical. Satirical comes from the word satire. Satire is a silent way of ridiculing the evils that happen in society in a laughable way. You are laughing, you are trying to condemn. You are trying to condemn the evils that are happening in society. Somebody is supposed to build the nation, he doesn't. Also, he pretends to be building the nation in quotes. Sometimes the examiner may ask you, why is the title in quotes? Why is the title in quotes? Depending, you know, poets have what we call poetic license. We have what we call poetic license. In which case, the literary writer, poet, novelist, short storyteller or storyteller and whatnot, they have the audacity, they have the permission to manipulate language so that they can use that language for their own effect. So, that is why poems are written in lines and not in sentences. That is why poems are written in stanzas and verses and not in paragraphs. So we say stanza 1, stanza 2. That is why the poets can ignore the punctuation marks. He can decide to put a certain word in the uppercase to bring the effect that he wants. He can quote somewhere. He can use the hyphen. He can ignore the full stop. He can start with a small letter, etc., etc. So in that case, the title is very important. There is a poem by Olude Majorie Makoye which says, freedom song, freedom song. We know what freedom is: liberty, emancipation, freedom song. Adino washes dishes, Adino wakes up early. Beds are sat down in the kitchen. Atieno, 8 years old. Atieno yo. Stanza 2. Since she is my sister's child, Atieno needs no pay. Look at that. Let me stop there. Is that freedom? There's no freedom in that. There's no freedom. So the poem is also ironic. But if you look at this poem here, The Guilt of Giving, explain the title of the poem by discussing 3 different guilts. You have to read between the lines, my friend, for you to understand these 3 different guilts. Who is guilty of what? Who else is guilty of what? Who is the third person who is guilty for what? So, looking at the title alone, the guilt of giving, guilt, that is a noun, of giving. Why should one feel guilty of giving? Now look, we have the guilt of failing to give because of lack of change. You recall the day you came upon him and were startled by his silent presence. Now intruding into your preoccupation, you held a coin, which means the mark, and rolled into the gutter where he groped for it. But if you look at the first stanza, you've seen that heap of rags that pollutes the air-conditioned city center, that louse that creeps about in the clean core of sophistication. You've seen him waylay his betters and make them start, especially when they have no change. Change here, we are talking about the loose coins. The guilt of failing to give. It is the people, the street walkers who are guilty. The third character in the poem, the crowd, the scandalized crowd, that is now guilty of failing to give because of lack of change. There is yet another guilt. The guilt of embarrassment caused by hurling the coin to the beggar but failing to land in the beggar's bowl. You hurled a coin, which means the mark, and rolled into the gutter where I groped for it. With a chilling, grotesque gratitude that followed you down the street, you dived into the nearest shop to escape the stare of the scandalized crowd. You dived. You were guilty or embarrassed because as you held the coin, it means the mark. It means the beggar's bow. So you became guilty. How about the third one? There is also the guilt of reminding the city dwellers of the beggar's presence. There's supposed to be an apostrophe here between R and S. Of the beggar's presence, something which is to them or that is to them inconsequential. The beggar has been there. The beggar is now even what we call a permanent mark, a landscape, a landmark, not landscape, a landmark. The landmark, the beggar, a commonplace, a usual phenomenon, something they have always learned to ignore, something they have learned to avoid, something they have learned to ignore, inconsequential. There is the guilt of giving, reminding the city dwellers of the beggar. Now finally, we have the third typical exam question. That is, identify 3 poetic devices. The poetic devices are literal devices. Those devices that infuse the literal meaning, okay? The words that are actually said, that which infuses them with the figurative meaning. Figurative meaning is the implication or the unexpected connotations. The unexpected connotation. Every word that we have can be used either connotatively or denotatively. Denotation is the literary denotation. Literal. And then connotation. Connotation. We have the literary. The literariness. Connotation. You must take care of this art. The literariness. And here we are talking about literally. Denotation. So, literal. Connotation. This is surface meaning. Surface meaning. And this one here is the figurative meaning. The figurative meaning. So, in this poem, I want you to go to this poem and look at the figurative meaning of words. I want you to identify the metaphors that are there, the personification and the paradox, so that you place them in my inbox for checking. You quote the metaphor, you underline it, and then you pick the metaphor, that phrase which is metaphoric, and you give its meaning. You give the personification, and you quote it, and you give its meaning, and the paradox, etc., etc. 1, 2, 3. Until next time, thank you for listening.